Hey everyone, Mystical Mark here. So this will be your weekly astrology forecast for the week of June 8th to the 14th of 2025. Before we get into the charts for this week, if you're looking for any kind of a reading with me, all those links are in the description below. If you're on YouTube, if you're on TikTok, just head over to my bio and go to my link tree. Absolutely everything is there. You can do that on YouTube as well. The link isn't below. For readings, of course, I do offer live one-on-one readings that may be a bit limited in terms of my schedule. However, I do offer recorded readings on my Etsy shop where you can purchase them, and then I just do the recording when I can and I send it off to you in that way. All right, and all readings and everything are basically all evenly priced across platforms where I have them. Okay. With all that being said, of course, before we head into the charts this week, like I always say at the beginning of all my videos, my guidance has been and likely always will be, astrology is an energetic template conducive to certain things. All right? And of course I get things through intuitively, okay? And astrology is an energetic template conducive to certain things, meaning that that energetic template exists. However, we still have free will within that, and is always subject to change. The events as such will still occur surrounding these energetic themes, but there's still variability within that, all right? And that's where our free will comes in, all right? It's like a formula of math, okay? The astrology or the energetic template is the math formula. However, within that formula, there's variables, right? Which variable are you solving for? Is this variable going to be like this number, that number, etc.? You know, altering those variables within that formula is like our aspect of free will, or that aspect of creativity in terms of maybe how our higher selves or guides, etc., or source is using this energy in certain ways, right? So that's that aspect of variability that can exist there, all right? So there is no one-size-fits-all answer, and of course with anything, with any intuitive stuff that I say in this video or any other video, or from anyone's reading, okay, all intuitive readings are always subject to change, and there's no 100% guarantee that they will come to fruition. All right, you get it from this vantage point, and if nothing changes, then that is likely. However, it is always subject to change because we have free will, or the free will of our higher selves, of source, of our guides, whatever, that'll maybe guide us in a new direction, or a source saying, no, this isn't going to happen for you guys, we're going to go this way, right? There's that aspect of it to that as well, right? But it's mostly like we have free will. The message that I'm trying to get is to empower yourselves. Okay, we have free will, guys. And it's through that formula, through that energetic template. Yes, those themes are there. Yes, they do exist. Yes, they are real. Yes, they relate to the natural cycles of the universe. But we still have free will within that. Okay? All right, so let's get into the chart for this week. Bring it up on my end here. We'll start on Sunday, June 8th. All right, and this is where we're going to have, on this day, Mercury moves into Cancer. That doesn't happen until later in the day, and I have this chart set earlier for a reason when we head into that full moon. But this does happen, well, let me get the time again, 4:58 p.m. Central Standard Time on Sunday, June 8th, okay? So, with Mercury in Cancer, what I get with this is a very Cancer vibe. Okay, this is maybe bringing to awareness more of a heart-centered, more of that emotional aspect. This could deal with maybe more family stuff as well that is coming through in terms of, you know, maybe communication surrounding that, awareness, maybe sibling energy as Gemini, third house, where Mercury rules Gemini. It's can relate to sibling energy. Is that vibe coming through in terms of that Cancerian stuff? But let me see if I can fill into this Mercury in Cancer. It's just very emotionally expressive. That's kind of what I get with this vibe of Mercury heading into Cancer, is emotionally expressive. Like I said, expressing maybe more from the heart. Okay, expressing our hearts, our feelings, our emotions, that kind of stuff. It's more of that softer energy as that's coming through, that mothering, that nurturing energy in terms of that expression of the mind communication, or through our awareness, etc., as that comes through. Okay, so that's my initial vibe there of Mercury in Cancer. Of course, as aspects come through and build, etc., I will get what I get that comes through as that happens. All right. Prior to this, though, Mercury will be in a semi-sextile to Uranus here in Taurus. early on in the morning, and then obviously later in the day Mercury moves into Cancer. So what I get with this is there may be still some aspect of like shocking communication, but it could be like an aspect of like, what I get is like a stubborn communication. As Uranus is still in Taurus there's an aspect of stubbornness that is existing within that. But it could maybe happen out of nowhere in terms of that communication, especially as you're sitting at that last degree of Gemini. Well, this is at 28 degrees here as it's showing. This is very early in the morning. When does this happen? 12:31 a.m. So yeah, we're dealing with that 28 degree, but we're heading into that 29 degree, but we're still at the end there. But it just seems like it's an out of nowhere, very Taurian type of communication. Stubborn, and this is how it is. This is what I want to do. This is what it is. That's the vibe that I feel of that kind of energy coming through before Mercury heads into Cancer. Okay, so maybe there's something that comes through, and then as we get into our feels, maybe that becomes softer as Mercury transitions into Cancer, because maybe we need that to happen, okay? Also on this day is when Mercury is going to be conjunct Jupiter. All right, so as before Mercury heads into Cancer, Mercury will be in conjunction to Jupiter there. Interesting, while that semi-sextile to Uranus, so maybe that's what that expansion of that communication is in some way, that stubbornness that really comes through. There could be an expansion of awareness through that. This could also be like overblown aspects of communication, because Jupiter tends to expand what it touches. And I think this is what I was getting maybe with that 29 degrees of Gemini, because Jupiter's here and Mercury's coming to conjunct it. We're becoming very aware now of a lot of maybe certain things through communication, even just through the awareness of the mind and what we're processing in our minds and seeing and visualizing and what's coming through us through stimulation, right? Gemini is it's stimulation through communication, through awareness. Okay, so through that could be very strong on this day coming through, and maybe even seemingly coming out of nowhere in that sense as well. In terms of that Taurus, it's like, look at this. Yeah, we got to look at this. Like, it's that stubborn, like, bull putting its foot down in some way, in terms of maybe that expansion of communication, etc. On this day. We're also going to have the Sun here in sesqui-square to Pluto in Aquarius. So again, we're dealing with air signs, more communication, that type of vibe, but with the Sun in Gemini, illuminating awareness, illuminating communication, etc. But with this sesqui-square to Pluto, sesqui-square is like a super square that pushes for resolution in some way, right? Something that cannot be swept under the rug any longer. And this is dealing with hidden things that need to come up to the surface to transform and change in some way. Okay, the vibe that I got from last week's video was something shocking coming through. What do I feel like with this sesqui-square? It's like it can still feel shocking, but it's something that needs to change. Okay, so with this Pluto retrograde surrounding something that needs to change. All right, we're dealing with Aquarius, the sign of change, of progress, of that kind of stuff, where we need to make progress in a certain direction, and the awareness that is coming through with that. Something that can't be swept under the rug any longer surrounding surrounding those themes, right? That we need to change, okay? Through the awareness that's coming through of what needs to change and where we need to change in that sense as well. All right, so that's Sunday the 8th. Let's move on to Monday, June 9th here. And this is when now, after Mercury moves into Cancer, Jupiter will move into Cancer. Okay, so I talked about this previously on last week's video. This Jupiter in Cancer kind of helps to balance out all these other outer planets' energy that are now have entered or will enter into more masculine signs. Okay, so this helps to balance out. And what I'm getting with this is it's because of how our world deals with masculinity, in terms of old school, like toxic masculinity, patriarchal stuff, etc., that we need this Jupiter and Cancer energy. Okay, so what I'm getting is we need maybe more of this masculine energy, these outer signs moving to take action and move forward, etc., from a more from a general like long-term kind of a level to help us to push forward, to take that action, as that's that masculine vibe. But initially, to start to boost this off, we still need to be in a space where we're more heart-centered or more into our feelings, where we bring a more human vibe into this. And that's that aspect of Jupiter in Cancer. Okay, so this energy is being used in that way to help to balance that out in that sense as this is occurring, because later on we're going to have Uranus in Gemini, and we're going to have this very quick masculine type of vibe. However, this Jupiter in Cancer, even though Jupiter won't, like, the other outer planets will stay in their signs for longer. And what I'm getting is, like I said, with this initial vibe, to head this off, to almost like lay the foundation of this masculine-esque energy, is to really push it from maybe a more feeling, heart-centered perspective as we begin to move forward with a lot of this, so that we're not just stuck in maybe this old school masculine type of energy. We're dealing with this masculine energy from a more positive perspective. Okay. All right. We're also going to have Mercury in square to Saturn here. What do I feel with this? Initially, I felt with this is this aspect of, there's a harshness to Saturn, but I feel like there's maybe this compassion to oneself, like I said before, with Saturn in Aries, setting these appropriate boundaries. Saturn in Aries conjunct Neptune, setting appropriate boundaries towards having more compassion for oneself and having that growth for honoring oneself and the individuality within that. What I'm getting with Mercury in Cancer is this relates to maybe that expression of that emotion. In some way, the emotionality that is now coming through that in terms of maybe setting those appropriate boundaries, etc. Cancer may be a feminine sign, maybe emotional sign, but it's not really something to fuck with, right? It's that mothering energy. You're not going to piss off someone's mom, okay? Especially relating to, her kids or her child in some way in terms of what she wants to protect. That's the vibe that is coming through with this. Feminine signs aren't weak. Feminine signs are strong in their own right. Okay, but just because that energy is different doesn't make it less than. It just makes it different. There's strength in all of this. All right, but so what I get with that is because sometimes there's a harshness to Saturn, and with that square that pushes for resolution in some way. But maybe there's an emotionality to that communication as that relates to honoring the independence in oneself and setting appropriate boundaries by having compassion for oneself in that sense as well. All right. Also on this day, we're going to have the Sun here in quincunx to Juno retrograde in Scorpio. And remember, Juno relates to committed partnerships, contracts, could be business contracts, marriage contracts, etc. But with that Juno retrograde, we're going over those old grounds, we're reworking those contracts, possibly transforming them or even bringing an end to them in some way as well. With that quincunx to the Sun in Gemini, this is illuminating aspects of awareness, communication, etc. There's something that's being illuminated, maybe through our awareness coming through is what I feel with this, surrounding these contracts in terms of what needs to be transformed and changed. And this quincunx, what I feel is a frustration, because it's like, holy fuck, I didn't think I would have to actually make this change. Or holy fuck, I'm now aware of this. We have to make this change. This shouldn't have happened this way. There's that frustration that is occurring there, and now you're having to deal with something that maybe you never thought you would have to deal with in terms of these partnerships, commitments, contracts, etc. Right? We also have Venus here as well, is going to be in square to Pluto on this day, okay? What I initially get with this is there's an aspect of transformation and change and shaking up that needs to occur within our relationships as it relates to our own value and worth. I'm now being drawn to this opposition that is building to Black Moon, Lilith, and Scorpio. So where we've been outcasted in terms of sexually possibly, or sexuality, something like that, or just outcasted in general that needs to be transformed and healed. But what I'm getting is that aspect of the sex part of a relationship, and recognizing our own value and worth. Within that, with Venus here, as it squares to Pluto, that aspect of transformation and change. And there's, if we highlight Pluto here, there is that aspect of a T-square, as Pluto is in that square to Black Moon, Lilith, and in square to Venus. So there is something that needs to change and occur here. And of course, with this T-square, if you were to make it into a grand square, you'd have to include the sign of Leo. Okay, and this is a fixed grand square. So could relate to a crisis point, but with this Leo energy, it relates to that love of self and that expression of self that needs to exist and occur here that maybe hasn't, and that's maybe why we're abused or outcasted in some way in that sense as it relates to that. So with this Venus-Pluto square, as really, especially since Pluto is retrograde, this is old stuff that is coming up to be transformed and healed in terms of that, in terms of value and worth. It could be money related as well, in terms of our relationships in that sense as well, that needs to transform and change regarding our value and worth there. All right. Also on this day, we're going to have Mercury in square to Neptune. Okay, so there's square Saturn, square Neptune. So like I said, this is dealing with that aspect, the emotionality aspect of that compassion for oneself, our identity, etc. I've already spoken about that with that square to Saturn as well. It's happening all on the same day, so this is all kind of related to that. I've already talked about it, all right? We've also got this Mars energy here in biquintile to Neptune. Okay, so Mars rules Aries, Neptune is in Aries. This is behind the scenes, maybe a bit more feminine type of a vibe in terms of that passionate expression of oneself. Okay, but having compassion as well with that Neptunian energy and the expression of that and setting the appropriate boundaries, etc. with Saturn there to be able to be your individual self and the expression of that as well coming through. All right, so that is Monday, June 9th. Let's move on to Tuesday, June 10th here. We're going to have this Mars now in trine to Chiron in Aries. Now remember, Chiron is in Mars's sign of Aries, with Mars in Leo, that expression of oneself from the heart. That expression of that, the passionate expression of that. What I feel like that, is we're healing that. With that trine, there's a positive healing that is occurring here. With that burp, maybe the guide's saying, pay attention to this. All right, pay attention to this. That positive expression and healing that aspect of that positive expression of oneself, healing the expression of oneself through that trine energy there that is coming through. All right. Also on this day, we're going to have Mercury here in quincunx to Pluto. So again, there's an integration through maybe an emotional awareness or communication that is coming through what needs to be transformed. Again, what it feels like is this is something we shouldn't have to do, or I don't necessarily shouldn't have to do this, but we have to transform and change through this in some way, through whatever awareness that has now come through. Remember, Mercury is still in conjunction to that Jupiter. Even though it happened in Gemini, now it's moved into Cancer. Okay, through that expression of that emotionality, etc., that is now coming through, that may be leading through that transformation. What I'm feeling is that relates to that expression of oneself through those squares to Saturn and Neptune in Aries. All right, and through this Mars trine to Chiron as well. We're also going to have this Mercury here in sesqui-square to Juno retrograde. So reworking and relooking at those partnerships, contracts, committed stuff. That sesqui-square is something that can no longer be swept under the rug any longer. So there's an aspect of maybe awareness, communication, but I feel like now this communication maybe on an emotional level, or awareness to that expansion on an emotional level through whatever that communication was, etc., or just a general awareness in terms of what needs to be transformed and changed in terms of this. This feels like it's something that we shouldn't have had to do, but now we have to do it. In terms of reworking these partnerships, contracts, etc., that is now coming through. All right, Mars here, as well as in this quintile to Black Moon Lilith. So there is something going on, maybe behind the scenes, has gone on behind the scenes, or is currently going on behind the scenes, or something that has gone on that's now being brought to light in terms of this expression of oneself and healing these wounds regarding maybe what has been previously hidden or happened behind the scenes surrounding where we've been outcasted or abused in some way that now is being transformed to allow us our own expression in some way as well. All right. What I kind of get with this too is maybe how we've been outcasted in terms of sexuality and maybe the terms of the expression of that too in some way as well. All right, that's Tuesday the 10th. Let's move on to Wednesday the 11th here, and this is when we're going to have that full moon in Sagittarius. Interestingly, what I'm being drawn to here as well is Mercury is going to be sextile to Venus. Okay, and we're dealing with a very feminine vibe here. Mercury is still in conjunction to Jupiter in this sextile to Venus in Taurus. The emotionality and this nurturing aspect of relationship. And also what I'm getting is the value and worth of ourselves that it maybe exists within that relationship as well. So with this full moon, we're maybe highlighting and releasing. So what I feel like this is an expansion out of old energy through whatever this awareness was through this Gemini energy as it relates to maybe our own value and worth. There's a feminine aspect here that is now understanding maybe the value and worth and that kind of stuff that's going on. And then now there's this release in order to expand. Okay, because Jupiter rules Sagittarius and Jupiter is now in Cancer in a conjunction still to this mercurial type of energy. Of course, Mercury rules Gemini where the sun is. Okay, so there could maybe this aspect of feminine sovereignty, but there's this aspect of as well of maybe just this emotionality and understanding our own value and worth. But it comes from a feminine level, and it's releasing whatever has held us back through that in order to be able to expand and grow in new directions through that Jupiterian energy, that Jupiter in Cancer, that expansion of that, I almost want to say this nurturing vibe through whatever has come into our awareness to now nurture from an emotional level as this expansion occurs in whatever way that this is. It's an interesting energy coming through because it feels very Cancerian to me. Even though this full moon is happening, like I said, in Sun in Gemini, Moon in Sagittarius, because the moon is in Sagittarius and Jupiter rules Sagittarius, this feels very Cancerian to me, but this is a release in order to expand, because remember full moons are about release, but it's in order to expand in this new emotional space. Now what I'm getting is it relates to a lot of this masculine vibe that I talked about previously, why Jupiter is in Cancer, as it relates to balancing out that masculine energy, as it relates to like this masculine vibe in terms of expanding this balancing out of this feminine energy as it relates to that. It's like that masculine energy isn't bad, but it's like we need to have this flavor here. And we need to release what's in the way of expanding this energy. That's what I'm getting. Is there anything else surrounding this full moon in Sagittarius? I'm getting a Sagittarian jovial vibe. But at the same time, it's that Cancerian stuff that I've already talked about. Anything else surrounding this? Yeah, there's an aspect of awareness that is coming through, but in terms of maybe where we need to expand in more of a nurturing space. And I think that's what I mean in relation to that masculine energy is our patriarchal, that toxic masculine bullshit. It's masculine energy can be quite positive, but we haven't done it in a positive way. And I'm being drawn back to what I talked about previously is this rebirth of this masculine energy when we talked about Mars retrograde going way back, as now it's kind of relating, that's kind of more online now, but in terms of the residual patriarchal toxic masculine stuff that is still there as it relates to maybe more of that outer planet, more masculine sign type energy, but now we're moving into a space of where we need to expand a bit more on this nurturing feminine part of it to kind of put that old masculine in its place and understand a more positive expression of that. it's just, there's kind of like a lot going on with this. And again, dealing with Sagittarius Jupiter, there's kind of a lot going on, okay? You know, Sagittarius got a lot going on, but in a good way, right? Okay, anyway. But that's kind of what I feel with that, is that inflated aspect of that Jupiterian bringing in that feminine vibe, but also as it relates to that sextile to Venus, that Mercury sextile to Venus regarding value, worth, etc., and this expansion of maybe more of a nurturing vibe. Taurus can be very nurturing as well from a material perspective, a physical perspective, whereas Cancer is more nurturing from a more, I wanted to say feminine, but a more emotional, I mean, they're both feminine signs, but from a more emotional and a more mothering kind of way. All right. I think that's all I'm going to say on that full moon. I'm not really getting anything else on it. So let's move on to Thursday the 12th here, where we're going to have Mercury here now in this quintile to Chiron. So again, this aspect of what I'm getting is this nurturing vibe, this healing aspect, healing ourselves, our identity, etc., through this aspect of nurture. But of course, with Mercury here, nurturing through maybe an awareness from a more emotional level, or through communication, or through, you know, it could be like sweet words, that kind of stuff. But through our awareness of maybe what has happened, healing through that from a more nurturing space in order to heal those more wounds of our independent self, etc. All right. And of course, that can be maybe more behind the scenes type energy, or something that has happened behind the scenes that is now coming through here with that quintile. Or there's a creative, putting in the creative work in order to have that nurturing focus come through in some way. Okay, and then let's move on to Friday the 13th here, where we're going to have Mercury in trine to Black Moon Lilith here in Scorpio. So what I get with this is maybe there's, again, something that's more emotional coming out, or there's more of a nurturing vibe surrounding where we've been outcasted in terms of helping to heal and transform that in some way. So through what has come out, or through whatever that awareness was, and now there's this aspect of this Cancerian healing, that whatever maybe there was certain communication that wasn't good, in terms of maybe healing that through that aspect of that nurturing vibe of Cancer through wherever we've been outcasted in some way. All right, I know this can I'm trying to articulate what I'm feeling and getting right now, and I'm also all of a sudden very hungry. So I'm trying to get in between these stomach pangs versus like, okay, we got to finish this video. Kind of a vibe. Maybe I should have snacks next time. But anyway, that's the kind of vibe that I'm getting here. That there's a nurturing healing through whatever this awareness was that is now coming through here, in terms of healing where you've been outcasted, etc., and transforming and healing in that way. All right. Also on this day too, we're going to have the Sun square the nodes. So again, Sun in Gemini, through whatever this awareness is, communication is, that stuff kind of coming through. I get this, it's just an awareness, whether it happens through communication, whether it's an awareness in our own mind, that kind of stuff. That's the vibe I'm getting with this Gemini season, okay? As there's an expansion of awareness. That's what I'm getting with this. Okay, but with this square the nodes is maybe what we need to let go of in terms of what we once thought was practical in order to move into a new unknown space. All right, I've said before with this nodal configuration, South Node Virgo is letting go of what we once thought was practical. North Node Pisces is heading into the unknown. Okay, it's that Piscean fog. There's a veil there, but we're only seeing, the fog only lifts. It's like when you walk in fog, you can only see so far in front of you. You don't necessarily know where you're going. You can only see this small bit in front of you. Okay, but you know you need to head there. You know you need to head in that direction because what we deemed was practical isn't working anymore. So now it's like, oh my God, well, if this isn't working, where the hell am I going? Right? So we're moving into this new space through whatever this awareness was that is pushing, there's this kind of a T-square here happening that is pushing us maybe into this new direction that is like, okay, we've got to head into the unknown here. We've got to head into maybe what's best for us based on what is now coming into our awareness, and we need to let go of these practical things that are no longer practical. Okay, we've also got Venus here in sesqui-square to the south node as well. So again, Venus in Taurus and sesqui-square is the south node. So what I'm getting is this relates to value and worth. And there's certain practical things that we need to let go of that can no longer be swept under the rug any longer regarding our own value and worth. And this could be money related stuff, etc. Like I said, that it needs to be let go of. There's a resolution that needs to be forced there coming through. There's also that semi-square to the north node. So again, pushing in a new direction, even though it may be unknown. All right, so that's Friday the 13th there. Let's go to Saturday here, the 14th. We're going to have Mercury here now as well in this quintile to the south node in Virgo. So again, Mercury is ruling the south node here as Mercury rules Virgo, but in Cancer, there could be an aspect, I'm hearing emotional details. Okay, emotional details coming through in terms of maybe what needs to be let go of, right? Virgo is very detail-oriented, dealing with that detail-oriented aspect of Mercury. There's emotional details coming through here surrounding maybe what we need to let go of in a practical way, or just emotional details coming through in terms of maybe what needs to be let go of in some sense as well there. All right, we've also got the Sun here in Gemini still in sesqui-square now to Black Moon Lilith. So what I get with this is maybe a strong awareness or communication coming through in terms of where we've been outcasted in a myriad of ways. Okay, what I get with this Black Moon Lilith and Scorpio is where we've been outcasted in multiple or a myriad of different kinds of ways. Okay, but more, if you want to focus specifically on Scorpio, that could be in terms of sex, sexuality, etc., abuse in that sense as well. But this could be in any way, and I say in any way because Scorpio is where we get to the bottom of things, where the intensity of that comes up in order for it to be transformed and healed in some way. And with the Sun in Gemini, illuminated communication surrounding that and bringing into our awareness those kinds of things, because it can't be swept under the rug any longer surrounding that sesqui-square and what needs to be transformed, shifted, and changed in that way. All right, the Sun is also going to be in biquintile to Juno, retrograde in Scorpio. Again, this is transforming those aspects of contracts, partnerships, committed partnerships, contracts, etc. Of course, in Scorpio, that can mean it coming to an end, as well as Scorpio rules death, that ending. But because Juno is retrograde, it's relooking at that in order to transform them. And with this biquintile, what I get is there's something going on behind the scenes. This is working on reworking or transforming that behind the scenes that is coming through, or maybe it has been worked on and is now coming out in that sense as well. But it's whatever, there's maybe communication happening behind the scenes surrounding this, or through some kind of illuminated awareness in terms of whatever this transformation is that needs to occur with that. Also on this day, Venus will come into that exact opposition with Black Moon Lilith, while of course still being in square to that Pluto there in Aquarius. So there's a surrounding that aspect of change regarding our value and worth, right? And with this opposition to Black Moon Lilith as well, in terms of where we've been outcasted and transforming and healing that, and understanding that we have value, we have worth, even though we may have been shit on in certain ways, whether that's sexually or otherwise, that we have value and worth. And it's helping to transform where we've been outcasted in that way, whether it's sexually or otherwise, right? In that sense, and understanding the value and worth that exists within that, and pushing for transformation and change in some way surrounding those themes as well. All right, that is Saturday the 14th, and that is pretty much this week. All right. If you have made it this far in the video, please leave a purple heart in the comments so that I know you're a real one. I need to go get something to eat because my blood sugar levels are dropping substantially. Anyways, I hope to see you all in the next video. Take care. Bye for now. Bye.